Welcome back everyone. If you're new, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at how we can trade the 4-hour time frame by using the lower time frame to help us identify sniper entries or just entries in general. Okay, so take a look at this diagram, take a look at what I've drawn, right? What is it actually telling us? Okay, here we can see that this is, let's say this is just the example, this is a 4-hour candle pushing down, right? We need to understand that within the higher time frames there's also lower time frames creating structure. Okay, so if we see a 4-hour candle pushing down, we know that on the 5 minutes or the 15 minutes, we're going to be seeing bearish structure. Okay, so the example we're going to be taking a look at is going to be within the downtrend, but the same applies for an uptrend. Okay, everything I'm going to be saying, you can implement it and use it for trading and finding entries within an uptrend. Okay, so take a look at this chart. Right, we're on the 4-hour on EU. Okay, so what are we identifying? What is price action actually telling us? Okay, we can see that we are having a strong move to the downside and we're creating what we call lower lows. Okay, lower lows is what's going to indicate to us that the sellers are in control and that we're in a bearish market. Okay, why? Because price is going lower. Simple as that. Price is pushing lower, making lower lows, indicating to us that there is bearish sentiment, right? I've always talked about when we want to trade in trends, we want to trade the exhaust phase, or we want to find entries at the end of the exhaust phase. This is something my course talks about a lot more. Link in the description if you guys want to check that out. Okay, so what is structure actually doing and how can we use our lower time frames to actually find entries? Okay, so we see and identify this as our push phase. Okay, we have market pushing down, creating lower low. We then see this as our exhaust phase in the market. Okay, and this is where we want to be entering in markets, whether it's an uptrend or whether it's a downtrend. We want to be entering at the end of the exhaust. Okay, so like I said in the beginning of the video, how can we use the lower time frames to spot our entries and find our entries? Okay, like that diagram I showed you in the beginning, we want to find the exhaust phases then on the lower time frames. Okay, if we know that price is exhausting on the higher time frame, this is then an indicator to us that we can then start to look for sell positions, or we can then continue to place orders in the direction of this trend. Okay, so we have price exhausting up, and we then see here, this is the momentum shift, right? This is now our lower high. Okay, this would be an invalid lower high if price was to keep pushing up and break some of these structures we have here, or break the recent higher high. Okay, but we're not seeing that. We're seeing price exhaust and then have the momentum shift. So on the higher time frame, look for the momentum shift at the end of the exhaust to indicate that that pressure or the sentiment of either buyer or sellers are still in control. In this example, we're looking for sell sentiment. So this bearish momentum candle, momentum shift, is telling us that the end of the exhaust is over and that the bears are now stepping in, and that this is now confirmed as our lower high. So what we can then do is basically go down and scale down to our lower time frames, okay, and look for the end of the exhaust. We see on the hour is now pushing down, but we're now seeing this as a higher low. A lot of people then get confused. The trend is now changing, but no, we need to remember that the overall direction of our trend on the 4H time frame is down. Okay, so all we're doing is we're not going to pay attention to any structure or anything being made around here. We want to scale down and look for our entries, look for exhaust phases and the best positions to find our entries. Okay, so the hour, we see price came down, we're now exhausting on the hour. Okay, let's go down to our 15 minutes, right? We know that this here is our 4-hour bearish candle. Do you remember that diagram I spoke about in the beginning? There will be moves within a 4-hour candle push. You can see it here, price moving, little exhaust, push, little exhaust, push again. So this is that 4-hour candle. Back here is all this 4-hour candle moving down. We are now seeing the retracement. The next 4-hour candle next to it that we saw, this is now the retracement and this is now the exhaust. This is how we can use our lower time frames to find entries. Okay, we see on the higher time frame, on the 4-hour example, that prices was exhausting and we then had a momentum shift to the downside. We had a strong bearish close on a 4-hour candle. This is then the next 4-hour candle creating that exhaust or creating the lower time frame pullback. On the higher time frame, it's going to look like one candle or even just retracements on the 4-hour candle. But scaling down to the 15 minutes for this example, we are then seeing price pulling back. We're seeing lower time frame exhaust, and this is what I mean as well by entering on the exhaust. Not just the higher time frame exhausts, but scaling down to our 15 minutes and finding where structure how structure is moving and finding the lower time frame exhaust to find the best entries, or some people like to call it sniper entries. Okay, so we see here, this is the 4-hour candle pushing down. We're then seeing price failing to break any lower. So we now know this is a lower time frame push exhaust. Okay, and remember, ignore everything that's back here because it can confuse you. Don't look at this as a high or low. This is price just pulling down and now exhausting. Okay, and this is now our intraday time frame lower high. Okay, what we can then do is once we see price pull back, we can then look for again some wick rejections, price failing to break any higher, and look for that momentum shift. Okay, so it's going to look something like this. We're going to see price rejecting at a level and then creating our bearish pressure. Okay, bearish sentiment. Here price is pushed up. Looking at candles, we can see that the price action is telling us that we had a strong push up, strong bullish candle, smaller candle, and then a wicked candle, and then now the bearish sentiment is stepping in. Okay, when we see with price action, when we see candles shrinking, this is telling us that the pressure of that candle, whether it be buy or selling, is now depreciating. Okay, we see that price has stopped, we've got this wick rejection, and we now have the continuation. Okay, we then have momentum shifting on the lower time frame. So if we take a look at what it looks like on the higher time frame, we have basically broken down. We've seen our exhaust on the higher time frame. We know we're downtrend. We know we're trading with the trend, which is down, and we see our momentum shift on the higher time frame, indicating that the bearish pressure is still there. This candle here is the pullback, is the exhaust on the lower time frames. So again, let me make that clearer. This little candle here is the exhaust phase we're looking at on the lower time frames to spot our entries or our sniper entries. Okay, so going back to the 15 minutes, like I said, on the 4-hour time frame, it will just look like either a rejection or a retracement on the candle or a slight pullback. So we can see here that price is exhausted up. We're failing to break any higher. The momentum is now stepping in. Okay, once we see our wick rejections, once we see price on the lower time frame failing to break any higher, it matches with our higher time frame structure. We know that this is the 4-hour push. This is price just exhausting. And on the 4-hour, it just looks like one candle reacting up. But on the lower time frame, we can actually see what structure is doing. Okay, structure pushed up, bullish sentiment being completely depreciated. Sellers are now stepping in. Okay, once we see this, once everything lines up, we can then take the trade. And of course, we want to make sure that our stop loss is way above recent structure that price has failed to break. And then going for whatever your strategy tells you to do. Mine are usually 2 to 2s for spreads. I like to trade the 1 to 2 risk reward ratio. So what we can do is go to the hour and just let this trade play out. Okay, so what were we doing? What we were really doing is we would just, as you can see here, we take profit. So let's take a look at the 4-hour and what it was actually doing. Okay, we could see here that price had that lower low. We had the exhaust on the higher time frame. We then saw we had the momentum shift on the higher time frame, confirming that the sellers are still in control. Okay, we had a strong push down, and again the same applies for the uptrending market. We then scaled down to our lower time frames, which is this candle here. We then went into our lower time frame, and we were able to identify that we had, this is the 4-hour candle push. We then waited for the lower time frame pullback because we always want to enter the end of the exhaust. We then saw that pullback. We then saw depreciation in the buyers because the candles are getting smaller. We then saw the momentum shift, wick rejections. We then entered the trade with our stop loss above structure. This is what it looked like on the 15 minutes, but on the 4-hour, it looked like this. Okay, we had that pullback, which was this one candle here. By scaling down to our lower time frames, we were able to find the best entries. Stop loss was above structure. We then entered trading with the trend, and as you can see, price has now making that new lower low. Yes, we could have gone for a higher risk reward, but trade how you trade. Trade how your strategy tells you to trade it, whether it's 1 to 2 or 1 to 3. Hope this made sense for you guys. If you have any comments, leave it below. If you have any questions, feel free to DM me at my Instagram, Forex_Loz. Hope you all have a great weekend. See you all in the next one.